Here.
Here. Here. Everyone please rise for pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Today we're holding a special workshop to review some items that we've posted on the agenda. We're going to have a slight change in the order. I have Barbara Roberti will come up first to talk about, the fees and fines matter, which we've considered in the past and had decided we'd hopefully take one last look, this morning on that. So Barbara, why don't you come on up and address us? Thank you. Good morning.
So I presented some fees and fines that I wanted to have increased. It's all on the, most of them are on the commercial side, and some of them are in the fine category, which really relates to working without a permit for contractors and businesses. There was a question about us raising fees throughout the 20-teens, I guess you'd say. And I looked at all of them, and those were all either new permits that we hadn't had in the past, like EV stations or floodplain permit, wetland permit, uniform solar permit, et cetera. So I didn't consider those as fees we haven't raised since they were new fees. So at this point, in the planning board, we do not collect enough escrow, and we seem to run always in a negative. So I'm looking to increase that. And then the architectural fees are $150, and we charge $250 for conceptual, so I just want to make it uniform. I'm just highlighting a few of them. In the residential fees, the only fee I'm looking to change is a hot tub to be consistent. All the fees are $150, so that one's $100, and it just gets very confusing with having like one fee that doesn't make sense. Electric is the one that's $50 that stays the same. Requested site visits by owners. A lot of times we'll just go out if they come and we see there's an issue, but sometimes people want us to just come out and spend an hour going over their property before they're going to sell. So after speaking with the building inspectors and the time constraints, I've added a $50 fee to that. Not necessarily we'll use it all the time, but I need it there because sometimes that can take up a good part of the day. What I've done by the building inspector's recommendation, we had all these different fees for different occupancies. So we just gave it one flat fee to make it easier, not only for our staff, but for architects, engineers, homeowners, business owners, to just look at one fee and be able to calculate it for themselves. I'm just looking. So the big thing is expired permits. We have a lot of permits that are expired. This is no fault of our own. We can't force people to close their permit. We just don't have the teeth in that. So we send them expiration letters every 2 years, and they come in and they just reopen it, but they never close it. And there's a safety issue here. If they've put a deck on poorly and we haven't inspected it to close it, we're afraid, what if the deck falls off? And decks do fall. If they have a pool that they won't close, well, they have children swimming in it, and we don't know if they've done the electric properly or they have an extension cord to the pool. We don't know if they have a gate around it or it's high enough. There's a lot of safety issues with that. So
I'm not understanding why, if we issue a permit and it's not closed, right? How do we not have the ability to follow up and say, you can't use your pool until you close your permit?
Oh, we do. So every permit says you cannot use the pool till it's closed out.
Right.
We constantly are out there. We send them letters. We send them violation letters, and they just won't close it.
Okay, so how do we create a mechanism by which we can have a level of enforcement here?
So in a lot of ways, pools are utmost of safety in our office. So those are getting tickets. So we're dealing with them in court, and we're being very successful this year. We're really down from 20-odd pools, we're down to a handful. So, and they're closed. The ones that we haven't been able to close in a permit, they have covers on them. So at least that's a plus.
My concern is those that go and buy the pools at Home Depot or Lowe's and set them up in their yard, which I've seen them.
That's a huge problem because nowhere on the pool box, because I've gone looking, and people just assume it's temporary and I don't need a permit. So it's a matter of us, as we're driving around, finding them and explaining that to people. And I understand this as a consumer. You bought a pool for your kids for $400. Now you need an electrician to trench electric. Most of them are not 48 inches high, so now you need a fence with a self-closing gate. And it's upsetting to the people, but we stay on top of it, and if we have to, we take them to court. A lot of those people will either just get rid of the pool because of the cost involved.
Do we have any documentation out on our Facebook page that states this so people recognize, hey, by the way, if you buy a pool from Lowe's or Home Depot?
I could put something with
We
Tom
should.
across the top this time of year. We've done it in the past.
I know we can have it running across the
Yes.
top. Tom will do that.
Well, I know this season, though, I have noticed on the boxes that it says you must follow local regulations on these. And, you know, I know someone that doesn't care and just sets it up and uses it and then takes it down and sets it up and takes it down. And, you know, they have young toddlers. And I've expressed concern about this. But, again, it's a tricky situation.
And it's hard. Sometimes we don't see them. They're in a rear yard. You know, we've gone by, myself, where I see it with a little ladder in it and a chair next to it, and no one's home. And it's clear to see on a residential street, which means the kid across the street could even run over there.
Exactly.
The mother's not looking.
Yeah, and in a previous life, before coming here, had a situation where a neighbor actually put up one of those, pools, and it had a structural failure. And what they were using for the pump was an electric cord, an extension cord.
Oh, yeah.
And, the people had to be rescued by the emergency services, group, the EMS. And one of the children had gone into, cardiac arrest. And they resuscitate, but that's the problem with it. And those things do fail, or you put in the wrong water pressure, or you don't put up the right bar, right? So that's why
And I'd
we
like
have
to
these
say, because
rules.
we're on TV, that a lot of people come in and get mad at the town. Wappingers is ridiculous, and we really need people to realize that's the New York State law. It's not a Wappinger law, it's not a Dutchess County law, it's the law for the land in the state.
That would be good to
It's
include on
actually
the
a nationwide
website.
law.
So, okay,
It's under
I
the
was
uniform
concerned
code.
with our law.
But I think that's important to put on the website, that this is a New York
Yeah,
State law.
just a reminder to everyone that, and listen, I can understand why someone
know.
would buy it, and, my wife's been, hey, let's get that pool, and I said, well, believe it or not, if we put that up, there's a whole process that we need to follow, and, safety obviously is paramount here, and I think folks need to understand that, many of the laws we do reference are ridiculous, but in this case, these code enforcement laws are designed for safety, right? And it may not just be your family. It could be the neighbor that wanders over, the child that wanders over and has complete access to something that they can drown in. So I think that's important. Now, back to these fees. Also, I think we need to understand that these fees need to be commensurate with the expense upon which our town has to do these inspections and to do these applications, right? So, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, here, but the structure of these fees really is designed to cover the cost of the town when our inspectors go out and do the inspections and review the applications, and right now, they're not. Right now, we're coming up below, we're looking at 2010 numbers here, right? And you know that between 2010 and 2023, we've seen a significant rate of inflation and a significant number of salary increases, rightfully so. So we need to make sure that these permits are consistent with covering the cost of the town to process these applications. Is that correct, Jim?
Yeah, that's the law, and, in a perfect world, what you would do would be, you would do a survey to see how long it takes to process each application, and then figure out how many man-hours would be, and then use that permit. Obviously, you average it out, not each one is going to be the same, and you're not going to, but, you'd figure out how long, how many man-hours does it take to do a pool, process a pool permit with inspections or a foundation inspection.
So I have an issue with that. So you can have 3 inspections on the same day for the same type of thing.
Right.
One might be very easy
Right.
because everything's perfect, another one could take an hour, and one could be an epic fail. The other thing to bring out, since 2010, the New York State Code has changed multiple times.
Yes.
So the review is taking a lot longer.
True.
There's a lot more components to it. You have a lot of homeowners, and by the way, I'm not raising homeowner fees. These are more commercial. To come in, we have a lot of people that come in, they want to build a deck, and they just draw on a piece of paper the deck, like what it's going to look like. But we need to see the footings, we need to see hurricane clips, we need to see so many things that the average homeowner doesn't understand or doesn't know. And so our inspectors spend a lot of time going over it with Red and trying to explain to the homeowner what else we need. So there's a lot of time in the office that's spent that you can't collate and put on a chart.
Right, so across, average, median, I think we need to look at it from that perspective. We do need to right-side some of these fees so that we're consistent. My last question with respect to this is, over the years, we've looked at neighboring municipalities to see where we stand as compared, and I'm sure you've done this.
Yes,
Can you
we
give us any
have.
information on that?
So it's hard to compare to certain towns, say Town of Poughkeepsie. If you come in to do work that needs plumbing and electric, we're giving you a permit for $150 plus square footage. When you go to the Town of Poughkeepsie, no offense, Town of Poughkeepsie, I live there, but I go in and I get the first permit. Can't take out the electrical permit till they issue the first one. Now I got to drive back, I got to take an electrical permit and a plumbing permit at another desk. So there's different charges. So with one charge, we cover what they're doing in multiple charges. And it's one stop. To me, it's faster. It's easier for the resident or the contractor to come in and just have one permit.
So if you added up all the fees, right, so we're, call it 150, whatever it is, if you add up all,
East Fishkill, most of their fees for residential is $330.
okay.
We're-
So we're well below other
So
towns.
we're in the ballpark there. Some of the towns, like, I think it's Town of Fishkill, their fines are incredible. So even for expired permits, they're getting the cost of the permit plus 50% of the cost of doing the work. Where I'm looking at, your permit's good for 2 years. It's good for 1 year, and then you can get extensions. After 2 years, you have to reopen it. So the first time, you just pay the permit. Sometimes people's doing the work themselves, they're out of work, it's just taking them longer on the weekend. But by the third time, we're going into the 4th, 5th, 6th year, it's 10% of the cost that you've put down. So it seems like a lot, but at this point, at 6 years, you got to close it out. We have to know that what you've done is safe, plus we need to get this paperwork, done so that we know that when you go to sell your house, everything's there, where you don't have a lot of violations. So
So I noticed you also have something here for work started without planning board approval, so you now put a fine in there that says basically, don't start the work until you have approval, because you're looking at $2,500 first time, and the second time it's
and that's for
$5,000.
contractors.
Okay.
We have a lot of builders that just go out there and just get started, and we've had issues in the past where they'll just clear cut a lot, and before you know it, there's all kinds of work. Well, what happens if that person doesn't get planning board approval? What happens if their money dries up, their fund? So we really want to keep them in tow, and this is a small community, they all know each other, and I think if we can stop one from doing it, the others will think twice, and I know other towns are doing that.
What about the fire inspector fees? I noticed that before there was really nothing in there, and you've added a whole section for that?
Yes, so on Bill's recommendation, we looked at that. Howie was very happy. So we charge a flat fee, we had charged, and we are continuing to charge a flat fee for an operational assembly permit, which is a 1203. But as Bill pointed out, when we looked at it, it's really unfair to charge the tailor, the pizza guy, the same amount of money for a quick inspection that we're looking at Hannaford or a factory or something big on Airport Drive. So we looked at charging by the square footage, which is much fairer.
Well, it's fair.
Well, it has to, by law, it has to compensate the number of hours and the work that's being put in. So, I'll give you a good example of one that may not look like a huge place that actually is the new spa that's adjacent to K-Pot. That is huge in there. I've been in there for multiple automatic fire alarms. Nice people, right? But when they were cutting marble, obviously they're setting the alarm off. beautiful place inside, but the square footage, you wouldn't even know from the front. It is huge. There's also a second floor. You don't even know, not an occupancy for the public, but a storage area on the second floor. So as we're walking through with the fire department, that was the one that came to mind. I said, Howie has to do an inspection on this huge location, right? It's a lot simpler than Popeye's Chicken. I mean, you walk into Popeye's Chicken and the public assembly space is going to be just a fast food restaurant. But a place like that with, they must have 40 stations in that spot. It's huge. So I think we're going in the right direction. What needs to be understood is 1203, this began when, Jim? It wasn't that long ago when this stuff
It would probably be, I want to say, around 2008, 2009.
Yeah, so it's relatively young as compared to other codes. It does still continue across the state to evolve. You'll see it at the Association of Towns when they talk about 1203s. I think we're on point here by continuing to evolve our permitting process as the law continues to expand, because again, 1203 has changed. It has changed a couple times, and at least 2 times since 2008.
Yeah, I mean,
It's about
it
safety.
just
That's what it's
recently
about.
changed.
Safety is what these inspections are about. It's not a money grab for the town. I've had people tell me that. No, these are safety inspections, and it's important that we're putting the right amount of time into these inspections, and that costs money.
I think the enforcement is the biggest issue that we have.
It is.
And from what you've said, that has gotten better, but I think that's key in making all of these successful.
Right. And stop work orders. You have to realize, for a lot of business people, it's the cost of doing business. So from when we see a commercial entity and a contractor doing work without a permit, and we slap them with a $250 fine, they come in and write the check, and it's like, okay, I'm going to continue. And we had an incident on Friday afternoon with one of the building inspectors that somebody literally took 3 storefronts out. There's nothing there, and started constructing offices and all kinds of work, no permit. And then they had an attitude with her, with Susan, that, well, the planning board said it's okay. She says, but you don't have a permit. And it's like, but nothing structural. And the argument, so she gave 2 stop work orders, 1 for each unit. And at $250 a piece, Monday morning, they're going to be in to pay for them and go, here's your permit. Oh, and the guy swore there was a permit here, which there was not. So if you don't make it where there's a point, they're just going to keep doing it. And it's a lot of the same people. I mean, it's the same people we meet out there that just like, well, that's ridiculous. I put paperwork in. I'm just starting. But that's not the way it works, because what if your permit doesn't get issued? What if we have issues with what you've submitted? We don't know if you have insurance. There's so many problems that we come up to, and it's like we're banging our head against the wall because it just keeps happening and happening.
But if it's repeat offenders, Jim, what can we do about that?
Well, you could write the way the codes, the violations are written, there's increased fines for repeat offenders, but again, you have to have you have to have a predicate conviction.
So just for an example, if this got raised, instead of $250 for each stop work order, it would be $500 for each. A second offense is $1,000. So, when it gets painful, the people that just do whatever they want, they stop and they play by the rules, and the rules are for their safety as well as wherever they're working. We have to make sure that everything is safe.
No, I understand, I agree with you, but if it's a business consistently...
But it's the contractor doing work.
Well, if it's a contractor doing that repeatedly, Jim, what can we do?
Well, one of the problems is sometimes a lot of the violations are typically written against the property owner rather than the contractor.
Well, how do we address the problems with the contractor?
When you have to write the violation against the contractor rather than, you
Then
can.
maybe that's something that we
And do.
address.
And we
So,
do.
that's the thing is usually, the permits are for the most part written for the property owner rather than the contractor. The contractor comes in and is the applicant. As far as work without a permit, you can write it against the property owner, you can write it against the contractor doing the work, you can write it against the tenant. That's one of the things
But if
too.
it's a consistent contractor, a specific one,
Again, it has to, so in order to establish a second offense, you have to prove the first offense. And it has to be a conviction, not an allegation. So the way the law works, right, if you're a second-time loser, you have to have a conviction, not a charge. So a lot of times what happens is there's a stop work order, somebody comes in, and it never gets to court because the stop work order is issued and it's, resolved.
Maybe we should
So-
start issuing it to the repeat contractors that disregard the law. I mean, and I'm talking on various
We don't
projects. I'm not just talking a specific project. I'm talking if I have a contractor working on various buildings and with various developers,
Right.
and he disregards our laws, I think that should go in a record. I really do.
We're at a disadvantage when you're in City of Beacon, City of Poughkeepsie, you have to be a licensed contractor.
Right.
So you run the risk of losing your license, so there's teeth there. Anybody, you can do your own work for that matter. So it gets a little tricky when it's a homeowner involved and the contractor, we go after the contractor, not the homeowner. If the homeowner is also telling the contractor to go ahead and keep going, well, then they both get the ticket
Right.
or the...
Yeah, but listen, I did an entire finished basement the right way, with permits, with the secondary egress, and my contractor was legit. Everything was explained that he would be getting the permits from the town, and I didn't tell him I was a councilman. I wanted to see how this was going to go. From the electrical standpoint, they said the town has an electrical, I kind of let them do the whole, if you get the right contractor, come on, they're going to do it right. There's games being played out there, we get it, right? We just have to make sure that we, set the standard that we're not going to tolerate that.
Exactly.
Because many of these people will just pay the fines and continue the work.
Exactly.
And that's the game. So let's make sure the fines, and this is what I think Barbara's doing.
I'm trying to make them a little
Let's
more
make sure the fines are
painful.
enough to
Exactly.
say,
Right
well,
the
hold
first
on,
time.
maybe I better not do that.
But like you said, there is multiple contractors repeating the same offenses, and that's a problem.
Right.
And they need to be called on.
Well, then maybe we need to have a larger discussion, not here, not today,
Right.
about licensing and the pros
I
and
agree.
cons. And I understand that's a heavy lift. I get it. But perhaps we should have that conversation at some point, because then we'll really have teeth and say, okay,
Exactly.
this is the second time you haven't complied. Your license is now going to be potentially affected by this.
Yeah, and
I think
we've had
that's
internal
important.
discussions, and with Jim, and as Jim's noted, one of the gotchas which we've actually addressed with respect to the lot issue is to, take more enforcement action ourselves where we can. So, the court and the due process has been an issue, but Barbara does have, ideas with respect to that, so we can have a separate meeting in the future on it.
And one of the things, it becomes very difficult to do work, to prosecute work without a permit, because all you really know a lot of times is who's at the property, who owns the property. You don't necessarily know who the contractor is.
Good point.
So in order to write a violation against the contractor, you have to do some investigation to find out who the contractor is. It's not, everybody doesn't have a truck that says, this is me on the side of it. So that's the issue that comes to pass. I mean, we've had issues with respect to people putting in, heating and air conditioning systems without permits. And again, they're fuel, they require a permit because they burn, fuel, heating oil, natural gas. There's a potential for an explosion. They require a permit. A lot of people don't, as Barbara said, with respect to the swimming pools, that's one that we have, and again, so anything that holds 24 inches of water or more requires a permit. A little kiddie pool,
Right.
you don't need a permit for, but if it's 24,
24 inches, which is
24 inches and higher. And
those are the
24
ones you buy at Home
Right.
Depot and Lowe's. They have 36 inches.
Yeah, and a lot of them look, they kind of look like a kettle, like a big kettle.
You
those
wouldn't,
type of
okay,
ones.
you wouldn't think they needed a permit.
Right.
Just saying. I don't blame.
The average homeowner
Right.
in Target, and the kid's like, Mommy, a swimming pool. And they go, oh, all right, it's $3.99.
Right, but when you're plugging the filter into your 50-foot extension cord, running it into the garage, something needs to click, right?
Bill, your
You would hope.
requirement, how many people have run a zillion things in extension?
Hold on, and leaving it out there, right? And leaving it out there. Then maybe you might need a permit. But again, I know someone who sets it up, right? Hooks up the garden hose and then takes it down. And I said, listen, just saying,
We spend a lot of time.
Major safety issue.
Just anything blue, when we drive around, it's like it's blue. And we
Right.
go to look to make sure.
So why don't we do this? So there's a number of things that I think the general public may not realize they need permits for, okay, for safety purposes. As Angela said before, if we can take that list, let's get eyes on it, make sure it's updated, put it at the forefront of the website, we can share it to social media. We're going into the summer now. Hey, heads up, just so you know, these things need permits. Also, we should say, we're not driving around trying to find people, okay? I understand we have to do that for some of these open pool permits that never were closed. I get that, but we're not on patrol here trying to find violators. That's not what we're doing.
No.
This is for the purposes of safety, right?
Exactly.
So let's use the educational component and the outreach so that we can get people to understand that this is why your 36 or 48-inch pool that you bought at Lowe's needs a permit. This is why, and there's statistics associated with the bad things that can happen on these pools.
Exactly. So,
I mean, just so the public knows, the other issue with respect to the permit, one of the bigger components with respect to getting a pool permit is the fence.
yes,
Fence, there's a very specific requirement for a
Yes.
fence that goes around
Height
the pool.
requirement, that's right.
yeah.
Right, and it's the
Lock gate.
self-closing, self-locking
And
gate.
it's also, you can't fit, what is it, a sphere of
It's 2 inches.
2 inches,
inches.
so, you can't,
Right.
so basically, so kids can't climb the fence, put their feet in the holes on the fence and climb the fence. So, there's and these standards are nationwide standards. Actually,
Exactly.
What we use, the uniform code is uniform in the United States and Canada. So, New York State, these are not just New York State standards, these are in any state.
And it only takes once, and you
No,
would never
exactly.
forgive yourself
Right.
if a child has an accident and dies in your pool. You will never, ever, this is simple, this is easy. We have it out there, we're here to help you.
Yes.
We're not here to make money, but we're here to help people, because God forbid if a child or
And we want you
children.
to protect your property for your
Exactly.
children and everyone else's.
Exactly, that's why we need to do this. And
People
thank
don't
you for
often
that.
think about that
No.
neighbor's child that
That's right.
wanders over to your property and ends in tragedy. And I can
Yes.
tell you that in Dutchess County, it happens more than you think.
Oh, it's awful.
So do we have a motion to accept, adopt?
Oh, yeah, is this on the agenda for Monday night?
Well, that's right, yeah.
It's on for Monday, so
Yeah,
why don't
I put it on the
why don't we
agenda.
take
I
care of it
forgot.
Monday night, but I think
Yeah.
we're all in agreement
Yeah,
here.
we're
that-
in agreement, so we'll do that.
The one issue that did come up was with respect to the fines, as Barbara was just saying. And I would just recommend that the minimum, for whatever reason, our current code had minimum 150, maximum 1,000. That was for first and second that was for first, second, and third offenses. Barbara's recommending 250 to a max of 2,000. And I would recommend that second and third offenses be increased from minimum 250 to 500, and then a maximum of 2,000 to 4. I mean, I would double it for second offense and triple it for third offense.
I agree with that.
I would love it.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah, so we'll make sure we have that in
That's
the
I'll make those changes.
resolution.
Jim.
But with
Jim,
that,
make those.
Yeah.
we wouldn't be in a position to adopt it Monday night. We'd have to wait 7 days, so it would be at the second meeting.
Well,
Because it's got to be in final.
Yeah, I
form.
understand.
Has to be in final form for 7 days.
Everything
The
would have to
local
be in
law,
file.
right.
The local law. Okay, just to be clear. Okay, very good.
But I think that's important.
Yeah,
Thanks,
no,
Ed.
I mean, right, I noticed that the other day.
So we won't vote on this Monday, we'll vote on it on the
Well,
second.
yeah, we'll make the amendment.
Right.
We'll vote on the amendment to that, and then we'll defer it, based on the.
Right.
So do
Comment
I
period.
feel that I can start getting the fees changed in the office to go live after?
Yeah.
Yeah,
26 is when we're going to plan to vote on it.
And then
so-
we'll also work on,
Definitely.
actually, probably Monday, the notice that will go out, and the website's condition on the final approval. But I think right now, the notice relating to the permitting and the requirements that we have, that will get out there hopefully Monday.
I would say to keep things clean, effective July 1st.
Yeah, that's probably.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And I would just like to say that the entire staff worked on this, and we worked very hard as a collective group, checking other towns, thinking about how long it takes.
Correct.
So this
Yeah.
wasn't just me putting stuff on paper. Everybody worked
Yeah.
quite a long time on this.
Thank them for us.
And Barbara
Honestly,
does have
thank
a
you,
list of
Barbara.
other communities, because...
Yes, thank you to all the hard work, and also Asper Lane, two-story multi-dwellings, got a deck that fell off about 10 or 15 years ago.
Yes.
I just did a medical call there. That deck is about ready to fall off again. So somebody needs to get eyes on that, because there's an individual on the second floor who twice now has had to come down those stairs being carried, and it's not good.
Okay, I'll have
So
that
I don't know
back in
what's
mind.
going on with that thing, but I thought it was coming down a couple weeks ago with us
Okay.
on it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Barbara.
The next item for discussion is Route 9 sewer and water. The reason why this is here is that we're going to be, amending and then refiling our grant application that we have standing, basically, for Route 9. We've applied before the towns approved the basic application, the bond issue, to the extent that it's needed. So in light of the application coming in at the end of the month, the due date, which is a common application that we have on file, then Tim, you wanted to review the numbers that we have right now, the update, based on the phases as he's defined in his budget, project list. Tim, it's all yours.
Okay, so just a global overview, we talked about our capital project outlays and coming up with a master plan, and now this isn't working. So Route 9 water and sewer was to run the extension, from the north end all the way to the town line with Fishkill. We created just a brief financial summary here. Sorry, everybody, this is going to some strange.
Tim, right now, it ends at what, Farley House?
That's what I'm trying to show you.
Okay.
It's the extension that we're talking about is really like almost at the village line on Route 9.
So there's gaps, Chris.
Yeah.
We have, the northernmost, part of the town along Route 9, and then there's the middle one, but basically around where Dunkin' Donuts, Yuen Chen's operation is. Then the rest of it is, beginning around Fowler House. Actually, I think the Roaming property, on the other side has also fire hydrants and it circles around. So that's really what we're looking at. So if you got the full amount, then it would be, both water and sewer, these
Right.
costs based on this estimate. However, if we are able to do trenching and put in sewer, pipe at the same time, then, it would reduce, some of that cost. So that's what Tim's estimates involved. And then there's the north water, south water.
Right, so we looked at it 16.7 for the full run of water and 35.2 for the full run of sewer. That's the entire run of Route 9. Last year, we applied for the WIA grant and recognized these costs were way too much relative to the grant. So we broke up the water into a north leg and a south leg, each of about 8.3 million. We applied for the WIA. We got on what's called the multi-year list with EFC. It means they recognize the project, but we haven't finalized a design or an engineer's report or any of that for financing. We are right now currently in the WIA grant season, so we'll need to resubmit this application to keep it alive, which I believe is due Friday. We had a call with Scott Williams last week. And then based on the WIA recognition, Congressman Ryan's office recognized the project, and through their funding ability, they could go up to a max of 3.5 million. So we basically worked with their grant department and broke up the Route 9 North segment into several different smaller legs. So long story short, your best kind of starting point is the 3.5 million if the grant is formalized and awarded. And then from there, we can start building off of that relative to possibly some town funding to augment that, maybe commercial property funding and other grant applications. So
So what is the phase? I know there's a phase that's like a $6 million phase. So you've got different phases as part of that 16.7 million. So 3.5 as an example. And again, is that a formal approval that we're getting the 3.5 million, or is it just a nomination?
That was the nomination.
Okay, so
You know,
when do we
with-
find out if we formally get
Yeah,
the money?
they were in that debt ceiling, but,
Okay.
so fairly shortly.
Okay.
is my understanding.
So out of the 16.7, we broke that up for the full water project cost. We
Okay.
broke that up into the north and south, each of the 8.3 million there.
Mm-hmm.
And then this 3.5 would theoretically apply to the north 8.3 million, because we have to start north and work south just for logistics and extending the water main, so.
Now, wasn't there something out there that had, I guess Ryan asked for
Yeah, so we had-
$1.5, $2.5, $3.5 million
Yeah, so
worth of
we had to
projects?
So we went for or I guess we're nominated for the maximum
Right.
3.5, but we also had to submit to their office a 2.5 version and a 1.5 version.
Correct.
So if you think about it, the more money you get awarded, the more water main you can install, and that's really the difference between.
I get it, but we have a project today that you can do for $3.5 million.
That's what we pared it down in concept level for this grant application, yeah.
Although what we like to see is 3.5 plus whatever
Plus as much-
money we get, whatever to get to the
And
8.3.
that's where the WEA EFC process comes into play, and that's both grant funding as well as low interest rate loans over a longer period of time is what the state would provide.
And we got several, and we'll probably even add more
Yeah.
commercial endorsement letters for the Route 9 extension, because the supervisor had a meeting, I guess,
Right.
a couple weeks ago with that group. And then we also have the Dutchess County Health Department endorsement for
Correct.
the water based on.
And based on the two aspects of this is that, we need to first get the mains down, Route 9, and then it would be the, laterals that would go out into the rest of the community, especially in the south area. The second key aspect of it, as everybody knows here, is the sewer, particularly with respect to Fleetwood, which we are working with the state on that. We got a small grant of 30-some thousand.
30,000, a little more with the
Right.
town grant.
Yeah.
Or town match, sorry.
And so, which was, what, a 20% match?
20%.
I think 20% match on that, as we've discussed before and approved. And then, we'll be looking at other grants with respect to that lateral aspect going to the, both, west and east, for sewer. But the priority first is the Fleetwood, sewer plant, since that's the one with notice of violation on it. We do not have a consent decree yet on that, but we do on the other two. It's coming, we know.
So from a water perspective, right, do we have the water districts created yet? And do we know if we're going to be able to get by-in? Because most of that's commercial.
All that we'd have to get into.
Yeah.
This is just a conceptual layout from A to B, and then there's a lot of things that have to get
Right.
filled in there. Once the town decides, hey, we have a project, let's fund it, now we have to start doing these things like.
So I think, Al, based on that, Jim and I, we've discussed, and I think we've had the discussion at the board, that we have, both on this sheet and some others, a number of areas that aren't in the water or sewer district, not in the water district. Some are in the sewer big pipe, district, which gives them certain entitlements. So we've been thinking about, but yet we're not there. We'll, of course, have a discussion is perhaps doing them all at the same time. Because in the interim, we have been granting certain, tenancy agreements, to connect certain properties, including down, Route 9, where we have one property.
So with respect to Route 9, over the years, there's been a lot of interest from the commercial properties, various commercial properties on Route 9. And one of the things, and this might be a discussion with respect to WEA at some point, well, probably too late to do it, but so when you create a district, there's two ways to create a district. One is on petition of the property owners, and then the second way is on motion of the town board. So from a funding point of view, if there's a petition that comes in from the property owners, I think that in and of itself evidences support from the property owners that they want that expansion. with respect to, if it's on the motion of the town board, and procedurally, there's another issue is, if it comes in on petition, then there is no permissive referendum. If it's on motion of the town board, it is subject to permissive referendum. Now, with respect to a petition, what you have to do is you have to have more than 50% of the assessed value of properties in that proposed district, which, for a lot of these properties, they're pretty high value properties, and you could probably get over the 50% threshold pretty quickly. The other issue is along Route 9, there's not a lot of residential properties.
Right.
So, and that functions that factors into the way these things are calculated. But, over the years, and there's been meetings at Town Hall, and there's been meetings, among various, business leaders regarding that. And I think that it would probably be possible to get a petition together that would meet the requirements for the expansion. Now, whether you do it one petition for all the properties or where you break it down in phases for funding purposes, that may be the way to go to show the commitment from the property owners, as well as, and it's a step that's required. So, one of the things is that you may not, you can create a district and not spend it, and hold it in abeyance for future action. Just because there's a district that's created, you don't actually have to go in and issue bonds and begin construction, but you could create a district and kind of hold it out there until the money comes available.
So one of I'd say the biggest issue, the intangible issue relating to that, and then the overall project, and the concern I've had raised by a significant number of the business people as well as residents, such as over in Fleetwood, is that of tax consequences, that if in fact districts are created or we approve and the pipe starts going in the ground, then what does the tax assessor do with respect to suddenly starting the tax before the actual value is enabled, right? So that they can expand their property value. The pipe's in there, the water district and sewer district are there, but then the next assessment, then we have to deal with that issue, I think, because that's the biggest concern raised, that they don't want to start having to worry about, tax assessment. Of course, I've explained the difference between assessment and what our levy is, but at the end of the day, they're still worried about that impact, and then we delay.
So technically, from an assessment point of view, I don't think a property owner's assessment would change until such time that they were hooked up to municipal water and sewer.
That's what I've said, that
Right.
we would try to make sure was the case, but I'm just raising that there's that concern. So
And that's
everybody knows.
from the assessed value
Right.
point of view.
Right, but I think what the supervisor's referring to is, once we create a district and we have X number of properties within the district, and they start being assessed or charged as a...
Higher value.
No, I'm talking about it.
Well, the benefit assessment end
Right.
is not charged until such time. So the benefit assessment for the project is charged for debt service.
Right, but we do have...
So if you create a district and don't do anything with it, we've got a number of drainage districts that have been created.
Right.
And they typically get created during the time of subdivision. And then the improvements are not turned over to the town until the subdivision is completed and accepted. There's no taxing on that district until such time as it comes online.
But you have properties on the north side of Old Hopewell Road, east of Route 9, that pay sewer tax that are not connected to the sewer.
Correct.
Because of the big pipe.
I think that's what he's talking about. So,
Yep, exactly.
let me just say this real quick. I've been here for a while, and we've had the conversation about water expansion, I don't know, a lot of times, right? So I think we just need to kind of reframe it here. This is my position. This infrastructure should have been put in place in the 1960s, okay, when it was 90% reimbursable from the federal government for water and sewer. Was not done. There's reasons why it wasn't done based on philosophies in those days. Here we are today. We've discussed this, I would say, multiple times every 5 years for the last 15 years, and the price continues to go up, 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 and up, right? Kudos to the supervisor and Congressman Pat Ryan for coming to the table with the $3.5 million number. But the truth is, that is, as you can see here, that's just a drop in the bucket, right? I think what the public needs to understand is, in order for us to expand water to the southern end of the town to the residential areas, we need to run these mains down the main thoroughfare, okay? So this is not a project that is specific to the commercials. And I understand why some people say, wow, you're trying to cater to the commercials. Well, I'm not trying to cater to the commercials, but I think that by improving the quality of the commercials that we get on the southern end, right? We don't need any more car dealerships. We're the car dealership capital of Dutchess County at this point. Larger commercial endeavors at the southern end that are increased ratables, right, are going to be beneficial to all, okay? And that's going to offset, it's going to help balance, I should say, the base rate proportions with respect to the residential impacts on taxes. And it's also going to give us the ability to expand that outreach of water from the southern end once those mains are in. So it's a heavy lift, obviously, to do this, and we were successful using private endeavors to get this down to Adams and get it down to McFarland Road. The town then expanded from McFarland Road all the way back to Old Hopewell to close that loop, which is important not only for the system, but for public safety, okay? We have had success with New York City's expansion on the New Hamburg Road side, which most people may not realize how significant that is from a public safety standpoint, especially with tall trees. But we need to continue this infrastructure expansion because it's going to become even more expensive to do this in years to come. So I think it's a good start, but we're still at the conceptual level. I mean, we haven't gotten to the point where we need to start talking about districts. And I don't want to give any residents added anxieties with respect to, well, I don't want to, pay additional taxes. We haven't even gotten to that point yet.
Agreed.
I don't want to, we're not going to arbitrarily make a decision from this town board. We may not even be here by the time this happens, but I don't think this town wants to make any arbitrary decisions with respect to creating districts until we can explain what the benefit's going to be, right? That's important. Okay, your well's been giving you problems for 10 years, right? Now we have an option to give you water. This is what it's going to cost. Just like we talked about previously with other locations in the town. Let's see what the bottom line is, what the impact's going to be before we draw the lines of the district. Because in the past, when we expanded the sewer district, we had a bunch of piecemeal districts on one part of the town. We brought them all into the sewer district, right? And by spreading that cost across a large number of parcels, the impact was less. We did that in portions of the water district as well when we created the large United Wappinger Water District. And I would like to see that approach used moving forward, right? Make it part of the United Wappinger Water District and bring these parcels into a large number so that the impact can be tempered as much as possible.
I agree with you, and I agree that there's a lot of residents that have lived in this town that do not have drinkable water, and their septic systems are a problem. And that's one of the major problems I hear from people in my ward. They don't have drinkable water, they have to buy water, and they're the closest to the river. And we're working on that. But I think as we look forward to help the future, this is very important. It didn't happen in the 60s, but we're hoping that it's going to happen for the future, to take care of the young that are moving into this and the old that decided to stay here. And this is very, very important. Very important. So hopefully we'll proceed and get this done for our people.
So the next item, which is also extremely important, it gets to the sewer, and we're at the point where we have confirmed that we have the 2 grants, as Tim has outlined. You know, the key now is getting it through Woodhill Green. But Tim, why don't you just summarize again the financial, because you've looked at it, you also have done the surveys, and so that's, from an engineering point of view, far more ready to go than you know, the water project and sewer that we just mentioned, Route 9.
Right,
Jim?
so it's been an ongoing process to get approvals. Our first main approval had to be from DEC and EFC, the funding agency, and we received their approval, which took unreasonably long, and I think a lot of it had to do still from COVID fallout. But we received the EFC approval, I believe it was like mid-March.
Correct.
And then literally a week later, the town was issued a notice of violation for lack of maintaining schedule, because when we sort of entered into the grant process, you know, they were like, hey, you're non-compliant, what are you doing to get toward compliance? And we're like, well, we're gonna go through the grant process, we're gonna do this, that. And so because of the approval was delayed, our schedule got delayed. We had a meeting with DEC, and they were basically like, we can either issue you an order on consent, which would probably have some sort of fine, or an overall timeline extension for Wildwood. The advantage at the time, because it was unclear if we really truly did receive the WQIP grant for this $1 million, and DEC was willing to issue this order on consent to give us points to obtain the WQIP, but we since proved that we have.
Yep.
So we're like, we don't need an order on consent, just give us, please, the deadline. So
Exactly.
we're waiting on a final correspondence with that. We have all other agency approvals, Dutchess County Health Department, DPW, and DOT. And so now the last piece of this is to obtain easements. And the big easement would be going through Woodhill Green, where they have their own sort of internal issues as a homeowners association, and there's been discussions over several months to try to get this ironed out. And I think it was like November was our last correspondence where they came back and said basically what's in it for us. And we know that they have water supply issues, we know they have sewage discharge issues, and the whole idea all along was to integrate their development into this project. So I think at our last consultants meeting, Jim, you brought up, you know, well, I brought up there's 3 different ways I think we could approach this easement situation with Woodhill Green. And one would be, you know, maybe buy or pay them the value of the property that the easement, the worth of the easement basically, right? So we would need to get an appraisal of that, which I don't know, honestly, who normally coordinates that. Is that something?
Yeah, we do it on the legal side.
So, you know, we need to move that quickly.
Yes.
But I'll also mention, Jim, something for you to check out. You know, Frank Riddle and Kim, they said that they have an easement, not a large one, but to the roadway on the southern part of their property that abuts, you know, Woodhill Green, you know,
right,
for
okay.
Woodhill Green. So maybe you
Yeah,
can check.
because he owns the property to the south.
So they told me, because they're, you know, I was talking with them about
Right.
the water and sewer on the north phase, right? But we mentioned that because we said that one of the possibilities of bringing, you know, certainly sewer, well, sewer would be a reality.
And that was one
then
of-
possibility of water coming down through there. He said, well, we already have a small easement and.
Because there was so kind of following up on Tim's point, one of the issues with Woodhill Green was they recognize that they've got water issues, they've got sewer issues. And when we first talked about this, one of the things was that the idea was that that complex would be tied into water and sewer. But that would have some costs associated with it on their end to tie in. You know, they'd have to abandon the existing plants, they'd have to tie into the new infrastructure, and it seems like there's real pushback from the individual owners. Nobody there seems to want to spend any money. So now, one of the things that has been troubling to us is that many people have recognized that there was a problem with their sewer system with respect to Wappinger Lake. They've never gotten any violations from DEC. They've really for decades. This has been an acknowledged problem for many years, and there's been no real push against that association. I know they've had issues with their wells, so originally that there was discussion that they would hook in. When we came to them with the proposal to do that, first it took us probably close to a year, and this again, part of it was due to COVID, but we couldn't really get any kind of feedback collectively from the organization. Nobody could tell us who would respond. It was kind of
They were changing leadership.
They were changing leadership. It was because it's a condominium. So, there was a great deal of upheaval with their governing board. But in talking to various people, there's been some financial issues from their governance point of view with respect to, financing their water and sewer systems, upgrades in the property as well. I know my understanding was they flipped through a couple of management companies. So there has been, quite a bit of upheaval. And one of the things that, with this grant money that was out there, from what I've seen, they probably meet some financial targets that would have permitted them to get some financing to do this work. But there was no organization on their end to actually do that. So one of the things from, that we talked about at the last meeting is our easement, or the easement for the town to run this pipe, the mains to connect Wildwood to the village, the easements run through the road system that's there, so it would be relatively minimal disruption to there'd be some disruption during construction, but we wouldn't be taking anything away. And from a valuation point of view, the cost of acquiring the easements would be pretty minimal because there's nothing in them other than a roadway, and you can still use the roadway with pipes underneath it. The other thing is, after the pipes, typically what we do anytime we tear up roadways is we repave. So that's kind of and we would do, we do that anytime. We did that on the project out to the DEP site. As part of that funding, included, tearing up Wheeler Hill Road, River Road, and at the end of the project, both of those roads were repaved. So, that's typical in any municipality. But that's really, the issue on the table. If we did not get consent from the condominium association to run the easements, that's what we would do. We would do a condemnation. We would just, put in the pipes and repave the roads. But we were kind of hoping to get some.
So what do we do to jumpstart this? We've talked about meeting. I think you were going to try to arrange something, but we need to do that right away.
Yeah. So.
Because we are ready to go to bid, and
Yes.
as I stated, we're waiting to hear back from DC and to put it in a sports, the ball is in the town's court right now.
I mean, as I think everybody knows, that the DEC loves to issue consent decrees to people that can pay. They don't issue it to ones that don't pay. But they take the philosophy, well, that will add a few more checks to your box and enable you to get more grant money. I don't particularly like that approach of agreeing to a consent decree, particularly in this case where we're all but there, just waiting for this one final action. So I think, Jim, since it's really a legal issue, we need to move because we have also the rest of Route 9 North, too, that can be impacted.
Yeah. So, and the other issue with respect to, timing-wise, from a condemnation proceeding, we can start the condemnation proceeding, and the way the law, the eminent domain procedure law is written is, once the town files the paperwork to begin the condemnation, we acquire title immediately, and then the balance of the proceeding is to establish the value. So it's kind of front-end loaded from our point of view.
And at this point in time, if we were to do that, right now, we would be just saying that we would get the easement to take the pipe through. Woodhill Green wouldn't incur the cost, because they're not going to be hooking up, at that point, and then it's a matter of whether or not we do a district or what have you, because we also have some businesses and residents further up the road, like at the trailer park, that want to connect to water and sewer.
And I know, at various points in time, Mr. Rettel had indicated that he wanted to connect to that sewer line.
And he came in to say that, to me, that they're very interested.
So is it safe to say that if, say, Mr. Rettel gave us the easement and it worked for us, that the cost eventually to Woodhill Green would multiply X because it's a further lead for them, no? For if 2 years from now, DEC finally wakes up and says, you're in violation, you need to fix this, their costs will increase dramatically.
Well, yeah, I mean, the cost for Woodhill Green, the lowest cost for Woodhill Green to connect would be during the work that we're doing. So if Woodhill Green needs, as you point out, their system is failing, DEC finally gets off the dime and puts pressure on them, then, they'd have to do up their design plans, mobilize, go out to bid, mobilize a new construction schedule, tear up the roads that were previously
Would they have to be
paved.
put into the sewer district as well?
Yes.
Yes.
So then they have to knock at our door.
pretty much.
So what is the overall objective here? Is the overall objective to get the infrastructure through the Woodhill Green property to Hackensack Road?
Yes.
Sounds that way.
No, down to
No,
the village.
well, so,
To the village.
so the overall plan is.
Right, from
so we-
Bliss Road, right?
It comes down New Hackensack Road through the
the back
Woodhill
gate.
Green in order to get to the, connection in the village, to the sewer.
So the route is down New Hackensack Road
Okay.
to the back gate of Woodhill on,
Yeah.
Woodhill Green on New Hackensack Road.
That's the sewer.
Sewer and water, we
Would be
would take
both.
easement for both.
Where is it going? Where is it discharging to?
So then it goes through the road system and then out to the entry road, which I
We'd have
forgot the
to
name
bore
of
under
that
Route
road.
9 and
Then
it
it-
ties
Right.
in on the village side.
So we're dumping into the village?
Into Tri-Muni.
To
Yeah.
try me. Okay, so what's concerned me here from the beginning is buy-in from the HOA, right? So we're not getting buy-in from the HOA. That's the issue. So what does that mean? We can utilize eminent domain to get the pipes through their property to Hackensack Road so that we can provide benefit to other properties, right? But we're not going to be benefiting Woodhill Green if they're not going to agree.
Right.
Right.
That's great.
I mean,
So
we
then you
would,
haven't solved the problem, though, because the problem is every time it rains, the discharge coming down the creek out of Woodhill Green. That's a problem. So I think we're putting the infrastructure there, but we're still not fixing that problem.
Yeah, you're correct. Under the 9-element plan that we have, there are 5 facilities within the town that are discharging to, the creek, causing the issues.
What's the condition of the upstream one? What road is that off Hackensack Road where is there a sewer plant up there?
Well, we have at the apartment complex right off of Montfort and 376.
Right, but isn't there Cindy Lane or something up there? What's
No, we have Wildwood, which is our
Wildwood's
plant.
Wildwood? Where does that go? That goes across New Hackensack Road down to the
Correct.
creek?
Yes.
That's the one I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
we have the plant behind
What's the
Quiet Acres.
What's the condition of that, Quiet Acres?
Yeah.
What's the condition of that plant?
Well, that's the one that we're talking about. That's under notice of violation.
So that's what we're ultimately trying
Correct.
to do right now.
Close that one
You know,
down.
So
Yes.
even if we don't get buy-in from the HOA, we're still going to be able to provide tangible benefit
Correct.
by getting that plant
Right.
offline,
Yeah,
correct?
and then as we bring it down, the pipeline down, then village, the residents and the commercial, of operations along New Hackensack Road between Quiet Acres effectively and the village, could then hook in.
So the rental property on the corner
Right.
of Woodhill Greens and Route 9.
And Bob's, Rawls, property with the trailer parks and so forth.
Okay, all right.
All that is interested, actually. They're, we've talked with them, they're willing to even pay some of the money to
For
connect
water,
it.
they're
For water.
viable.
Does this also go down Widmer Road too? So it hits Widmer Road over and it's some of the development over there too?
Which one?
The Wildwood sewer, so if you go through, because you're going to go through the Wildwood development, right?
Well, we're just picking up at the wastewater treatment plant,
Yeah.
abandoning that plant and putting, I think, basically a
Pump station in.
But the pump station takes care of all of the Wildwood development.
Yes.
Right.
Plus across the street, right, into, does it hit Split Tree and Quarry and all those too, or no?
I don't think plus, no, it's only going to handle
It's only gonna
whatever
handle
goes
that?
to that point. And
But, we can ultimately expand it once we're getting the Tri-Muni capacity, because we can't expand the
Right, to help
plant
them.
right now.
So the
to meet the
5.6 million that we have estimate today, that's a 2021 estimate, so we know that's probably going up 20 or 30%. And right now, that covers basically looking at doing the pump station through Wildwood and also running the pipes up to Woodhill Green. It does not include hooking up Woodhill Green, or it does. All it does is include
I'd
just
have to
running the
go back
pipes.
and see if we allocated.
Because I thought the whole objective here was to make sure that if you're going to run it up to Woodhill Greens, you're going to get them to do the HOA, to do the buy-in, so that you kind of supplement or reduce the cost by spreading the cost.
It would definitely help that, but I
Right.
think.
But they
to
refuse.
Bill's point,
Yeah.
we're sort of holding back everybody's progress over this HOA issue. And if we could move forward with the big picture and handle the HOA issue
So
separately. but
hopefully we can get,
I think that's how, but to stop everything until this HOA thing.
so that's why we've explored the condemnation easement, issue to maybe force the issue as well. But we need to have a solution, otherwise we could lose the money, because we have a
Right.
timetable that we have to comply with for
I
the
requested from DEC
DEC.
till first quarter 2025.
Right.
Because we still have to go to bid and then we have to build it, right?
Right.
So that seems like a long time out, but
It's not.
No.
we needed to be out to bid
Yeah.
probably last month.
Yeah.
So it seems like developments and sewer districts don't move until DEC says
Well,
you're in violation.
we've been moving on
Pretty
this.
much.
Oh, we
Well,
are,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole reason why we're doing this is because DEC told us
Right.
we have to.
Because of the phosphorus
So,
levels
right.
we can't meet.
But the people from Woodhill Green are saying,
No.
we're not in
Right,
violation.
exactly.
Yeah. So we've asked,
Yes.
we try to put pressure on the best that we can, DEC, to do that. The county's Department of Public Health is very supportive, and they are trying to do what they can to get that in compliance as well. So this is where we are, unfortunately, at the point where we probably have to take some action to
And-
at least get to the table. if
And
not
one of
more.
the things is that, the line that goes through Woodhill Green is going to be designed in such a way that it's got
It'll have-
we
capacity
still
and
have
it's
the
got,
connections,
it's
yeah.
got future stub connections
Right.
so that Woodhill Green can connect.
Right, right.
To
So,
what Councilman Beal said before, how significant would it be taking both of those plants offline into the creek?
Oh, it's huge. We have it in that 9-element plan I gave you. The numbers are there. I can get it to you again. But if you looked at, don't quote me on this because I've forgotten exactly, but if you look at the apartment complex up in the north, in Montfort, and you look at our two plants that feed into there, then Woodhill Green, you're talking about a 25% or 30%, reduction. There's, altogether those plants. The other one that feeds into Wappinger Creek, but at the lower South Creek, is, Fleetwood. And also, and I'm including also Midpoint,
Yep.
where Al is. That also is part of that 25-30% number, because that feeds into the creek up north as well.
Just to put it into layman's terms, wait till we get a lot of rain and go down to the lower creek.
Yeah.
And watch what you're going to see.
Yeah.
Okay, reduce that by 50%. I would say reduce that by 50% if we can successfully take these failing plants offline.
Offline.
I mean, the the product that comes through those plants when it rains a lot is untreated. That's the dirty little secret in sewer.
Let me just correct that a little bit, Bill. They're not failing plants. You know, we're keeping them fully operational. What is the problem is that the DEC keeps raising the thresholds, the requirements. So they're not meeting the phosphorus requirements that the DEC has set.
I agree with that, but they also,
The DEC isn't doing anything
when you're
either.
getting a significant amount of rain,
No,
it's just going right through the plant, and it's not treating it. It's coming out untreated, and that's not uncommon. I mean, if you look at the Hudson River and you look at the
It's
East River in New York
That's
City.
what happens with Tri-Muni.
When you get a lot of rain, that's what happens, and we want to do our best to show some tangible improvement. This is how we can do it.
Right.
Now, I'd love to see us get the HOA on board, because you're going to see a significant change. I've stood there and watched what happens, and it's not pretty, but if we can affect change in a positive way, that's going to be a win.
Why don't we have them come into one of our meetings?
Well, our problem is getting somebody to call back and to contact. That's what
And
it
we
is.
tried, Angela,
The others have been good about it, you know, when you look at our other condominiums, and we've worked with them, it's like Pavilion, you know, we were able to
Right,
do the
right.
I&I study, which addresses the
Right.
issue that Bill said, so that's no longer a problem, you know, with that heavy rainfall.
My understanding is that in Wood Hill, there are a lot of absentee landlords, and, you know, so they just rent them out, and they're not residing there. So there's...
But we need
you know, there's this kind of tendency to keep costs to a minimum.
Jim, you know, what I'd like to request is that, you know, in our June 26th meeting, you report back to
Sure.
us with the action plan and
Okay.
make sure we've taken efforts, and maybe also Frank, you know, and Kim and them, they can help.
I can reach out to the Reddles
But reach
and
out to
see.
them right away and then report to us your proposal at the board meeting, if that's okay with the rest of the
Yeah,
board members.
I'll talk to, I think there was a project that was before the planning board for the Reddle property. I know there's been plans over the years for the Alto music site.
Right. There have-
And the property to the north of
I
that.
think they own 5 properties there between Woodhill Green and going down to Route 9.
Yeah, they own south toward New Hackensack.
Right,
They own the self-storage, the vacant lot. They own DC Sports.
But the key is getting the HOA, getting the management company on board. So
Yeah, I mean, really the biggest thing, and you know,
That DEC.
the most important thing is really getting that sewer plant offline
Right.
and
Fortunately, we have a good relationship with DEC. We've been able to keep the dialogue going and to hold back, but there will be only patience for so long. And I don't blame them in that sense.
We can only do so much.
any grant money.
You're right, we
Right,
don't want to
we
lose
need to
the
move forward on this so we don't lose the grant money. HOAs are, you know, quasi-governmental entities. They govern themselves, okay? We're giving them the ability by running this line through their property. At some point, when they have consensus, they can connect to it. But right now, we can't. There's no way we can strong-arm them because they are their own entity. Correct?
Right.
well, I mean, the other option is to do a condemnation of their, you know, sewer system, which is going to, have a whole bunch of costs associated with it.
But it's better that we don't do it. It's better
Right.
with somebody else, because
Right.
we
No.
don't want to take it over.
No.
Exactly.
Exactly right.
I would argue that would be overreach
Again,
at
this
this
is back to
point.
DEC,
At
right?
this point. All right,
No, I
so
mean, and that's
okay.
right. So,
we're heading in the right direction.
yeah, and you know, if anybody is on the, board of directors, the HOA wants to reach out, call the supervisor's office. We'll certainly, certainly.
I think
schedule a meeting.
ideally, it would be a good idea to have their leadership from their HOA, right? A DEC representative, and someone from environmental public health. And we know who our engineer is there. I forgot his name, but he's very good.
Dan Kaler.
Dan, yeah. Very good to basically explain what opportunities will exist for them. That's the approach.
Yep.
I don't think they have an issue with the opportunities. I think it's more of a cost issue.
Yes, I agree.
Well, I mean, but the thing is that, there may be, realistically, there may be an upfront cost, but, going forward, it's really going to reduce their maintenance costs.
I agree with that, but I think that the point is that cost is going to be the issue there for them.
Just
So-
paving a road in an HOA, I mean, Montclair, years ago, just paving was a huge thing with
Yes.
respect to the HOA. So I understand why this is a situation that is, coming to a head here. But if you can also look at it from that perspective, right, you'll save money in the long run. Maybe now's not the time for them to do it. Maybe this is something they can get on the radar and start planning for.
Well,
We're running out of time.
But the pipes will be there.
We move forward.
So let's
Right.
move on with
Part A, yes.
Yeah.
another, Tim, why don't you summarize the water interconnection issue with
Okay,
the
yeah, so the
IMG grant?
village water interconnection was pitched to EFC as a water in and a water out, kind of give and take. And, basically, the water into the village was going to be viable through this water connection we're talking about at Woodhill. The water out was in a symbiotic relationship, although the town would never really look to the village for water because of their kind of smaller system and there's pressure differences. But the water out of the village to the town would occur through this Losey Road connection.
Right.
It was actually the opposite.
Or it was the opposite? Okay.
It was water out going to Woodhill, and it was water into the village.
Correct.
Yes, that's right.
Through
It would
Losey.
have been an out of district.
Yes.
Right, sorry, flip flop. Just think of water in and water out, right? So part of the Losey Road connection was going to be funded by the village, and their engineers designed and got approval. They apparently had their share of this IMG money. The town held up their share. We started designing the town's component to that, but the town's component relies on this physical installation of the Losey Road connection by the village. The wheels completely fell off progress with the village. They got up to the point of approval, but never bid the project. I've talked to channels at EFC. We were told the village is going to be able to fund that with an approved USDA rural.
But that fell apart.
That fell apart because the village couldn't prove bonding to secure
Yeah.
the 17 million that
Right.
grant was going to allow or loan. So the short version is the village component to this project has all but stopped. I've asked EFC to keep pushing because I've told my team basically to stop. I don't want to keep moving in this direction if the wheels are just going to entirely fall.
Right.
Supervisor mentioned this trailer park coming down, and maybe there's a way we could go back to EFC and ask for an amendment of our town's project share to allow maybe a little bit different connection.
Yes.
The other thing that came out recently that I was unaware of is that according to the health department, the village's water quality has continued to decline.
Right.
And he basically said he would not approve anything that would allow water out of the
Yeah,
village.
exactly.
So that torpedoes really this water in, water out. That's where I was going with the in-out piece. And so right now, we're at a standstill. I don't have the full estimate. I thought it was about 2.5 million, and this IMG grant was about almost 50% of that project.
Well, the original idea was one-third, one-third, one-third.
One-third.
We would incur one-third, village would incur one-third, plus a little bit more because they had to make some other improvements on their side with respect to the pump station or something like that, and then the grant.
So the original impetus for this water connection with the village at Losey Road was twofold. First, there was a fire at the Baptist Church, I want to say 2016, 2017,
No, it's before that.
was it?
Yeah.
And which resulted in very, very low water pressures in the village. And they had difficulty fighting that fire. Also, the village has currently one storage tank up by Mount Alvernia,
Right.
and that needed work. They needed to take it offline and paint it, and also reline it. And they wanted to have a connection with the town so that they could take that offline and, just on a temporary basis. This connection was not a permanent connection. It was simply to be a temporary connection. So that was the original impetus for this. And then, the village ran into financial issues, funding.
Well, in fact, Mayor Matt was the one that really pushed this.
Correct.
And then when, we, after, he left and then they had the election and the new mayor had come in at the time, we had a meeting here, all hands, meeting, including engineers, lawyers, the electeds, et cetera. And because Matt had told us that the money was reserved in Contract 5, I think was what they called it. And so then when we're sitting here, their engineers, told us, no, there's no money there anymore. There may have been, but it's not there. So that's where we started running into the difficulties in trying to work this out.
So let me just comment on this. So 2008 was the Baptist church fire.
Okay.
So there is a water tank on top of Hillside Avenue. There's also one on Delaverne, but my understanding was there was one needed near Riverbend.
Correct.
And part of the solution would be to have an emergency connection at Losey Road to ensure they had adequate water supply for that region. So I did not have an objection to the emergency connection, interconnection in this case. To me, if we're going to have a symbiotic relationship with respect to water to and from, though, that wouldn't be an emergency context.
And basically, what this original, the interconnection basically was pitched from the village point of view is rather than use the money to build that water tank in the Riverbend area, it made more sense to spend that money on the interconnection because it was, at least in an order of magnitude, approximately the same amount of money.
And we did do an intermunicipal agreement, which clearly defined emergency.
Okay.
So that we would address it. I think that was based off of your comments too, Bill, at the time, because this goes back to Matt's, term again.
And with respect to, the health department, under general municipal law, under environmental conservation law, and under New York State health law, there is a statutory policy where municipal water systems should be interconnected where possible to provide redundancies in the case of fires, in the case of contamination, so you have alternate water supplies. And the village over the years have had, issues with their water system. They have a connection, somewhat more permanent now, with the town of Poughkeepsie water system, which they've used over the years and has been a big political issue, in the village because of incompatibility of water treatment chemicals are used because there was a difference between what was used in the village
Chloramine
system.
versus chlorine, right?
Correct.
I believe the town of Poughkeepsie is now chlorine, right?
Right.
And the village is UV.
They switched, and town
So
of Poughkeepsie's now
everything
went
can
to
be
UV.
interconnected now.
Yep.
That said, though, we just got to be careful how we move forward here. There's a lot of history of water politics here. The entire Wappinger Plaza is the result of a water annex that occurred in the 60s when they annexed the property behind Wappinger Plaza. Hollowbrook, that whole section was part of the town. It became part of the village when they extended water into that area. The Wappinger Plaza is currently on village water. Outback is currently on village water, right? And we've had the conversation years ago, hey, why don't we just put them on town water? And the village, whoa, don't do that, because what that will do is cause a major increase in taxes on the village residents because those commercial properties outside the village of Wappingers Falls are paying a higher rate, which subsidizes the lower rates that the village residents have.
Sure.
So, Outback has the highest water bill. It's higher than Times Square, believe it or not. And that's village water because there originally was no town water available there. So now that we do have town water at the corner of Losey, in that vicinity, Losey and Myers, we could expand town water to those properties, but In an effort to maintain balance between the town and the village, we have not done that because we don't want to see a major shift onto the village residents by taking those commercials off. So that said, as we move in any direction on this, I've said this before, we have to be careful to maintain that balance so that the town is not inadvertently subsidizing the village.
Well, the other issue too, though, is to the extent that there's quality issues with the village water, we may have to look at, either providing an,
Well, I think, again, the core issue, as I understand it, is they actually do have an existing agreement with the town of Poughkeepsie,
Right.
but they're unwilling to pay that fee, for the cost of that water processing, which is more expensive than what we, are able to process our water for because of the nature of the water source.
The village has a state-of-the-art water treatment plant that I remember being there for the ribbon cutting for. It's probably 15 years old or 10 years old.
it was completed in 2010.
Right, it's not that old. And the fact that they are unable to maintain the filtering obligations, that's my understanding, or maintain the wells operating properly, that needs to be a village issue. I understand the town, no problem with an emergency interconnection.
Exactly.
But they need to maintain their system, because I know that those water bills have continued to rise every single quarter, because my father shows me, forever. They're never going to stabilize, they're never going to go down. And they need to, among other things, take a look at the financial aspects of what's coming into the system revenue-wise and make sure it's appropriate to maintain that plant. That's not an old plant.
No, and they had made improvements to the wells, which now one has failed or failing, and the other one's in not a great shape. That's why Dan Keeler said that you'd never approve water interconnection where we would be getting water, because ours is such a much higher quality.
So where I'm going is, let's make sure that we are facilitating a true emergency,
Right.
not one that they can see coming for the next, in the next 12 months.
In the meantime, Tim's looking to see what can be done, if anything, with respect to our share of the IMG grant.
Yeah, with the board permission, I can request an amendment to this scope that would maybe better.
At least
suit-
explore the discussion of likelihood. We won't make a decision, because I'm scheduled to meet, I forget when, but Kevin Hubert, the new mayor, to talk about
But
this and
hold
some
off
other
till after
issues.
you have that.
Yeah, hold off until I can talk with them, because also we have another issue related to Tri-Muni and membership, which I plan to talk with them about, too.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin is a
And
solid.
Kevin's more than happy.
He's a solid guy. I've known him for 25 years, but again, remember, he's brand new.
Yeah.
Some of the things that he has to deal with now, he has not had full background on until now, so I maybe hit him with one thing.
No, and that's the way I've approached it with him, and he's more than happy to talk. Part of it too is how also can we help in the sense, them on some intermunicipal things, again, not putting us taking over anything. It's just to help.
Right.
No, just to help. So at least that's favorable.
Sure, of course.
In that sense, more than happy to talk. So.
And also for the extension, I have no objection to looking at an extension on this.
So I think we can look at it, but hold off on saying anything until I talk with Kevin, the mayor, on that, okay? The next item is and thanks, board, for the, input. Midpoint Park, similar, we have had now the consent order, we've had notices of violation, we got, a grant that, has resulted in a study and understanding the I&I. I asked him to go back and have his folks and John Lazzaroni and team to look at the various cost options. And one of them was also going to East Fishkill. What's not built into the East Fishkill one is the possibility that the county, I've talked with the county executive, Bill O'Neill, they want sewer out at the airport in that area, so there may be some joint, work and grants. We're not building any of that in. Tim, why don't you just summarize what you found as far as the various cost elements?
Okay, so
Because some of this is new that we didn't
this
have
is all
before.
actually brand new.
Yeah.
So I thought it was important to get it to you guys today, and then there'll be more information
more
coming.
discussion.
But the town was awarded an engineering planning grant back in the fall. I believe it was $140,000
Yes,
grant.
right.
So out of that money, it funded an I&I study of the entire network that's at Midpoint, sewer cleaning, video, All of that was to basically recognize if there's significant areas where inflow could come in and basically bring clean water into our system that should really only be sewer. Out of that investigation, we've identified certain runs of pipe, and I'll qualify all of this that we really wanted to have, and we will, sort of a consultants meeting, Supervisor, with yourself, probably Councilman Casella,
Yes.
and Mike Tremper. We had met with Mike as we developed this report. It's really just draft as of probably last Thursday.
Okay.
But the intent of the report, once we collectively as a group get together on how we want to make our final recommendation to EFC, as Supervisor said, we looked at, 3 different ways to do it. Going to Tri-Muni, and that cost there is not just the transmission cost, because it's sort of an island, if you will, where it's located. It's like, a distance away
Yeah.
from Tri-Muni and a distance away from East Fishkill. But some of that $12.3 million to go to Tri-Muni would include improvements at Tri-Muni, because we know there's some basically capacity issues during heavy rain events, and there's a lot of I&I.
Even for this community that's still a relatively small community, that total increased capacity,
Correct.
they haven't approved or reviewed yet. Wildwood is all approved as far as
Correct.
within their existing
had a
capacity, so
will
that's not an
letter,
issue.
yeah, right.
But midpoint, we still have to go back and look at that, and, that's where I think Tim's referring to the fact that there may be some, issues with respect to expansion. This is not the clarifier issue, this
No.
is some other issues
Right.
related to it.
So relative to that, 12.3 to send it to Tri-Muni. We looked at the East Fishkill route. Again, it's quite a ways away from the facility, but as Supervisor mentioned, there may be other avenues to tie in and bring in other users to either help fund or offset
Right.
some of those costs. Obviously, the numbers jump out at you that to replace the wastewater treatment plant with, some of these high-tech membrane sort of battery ash, MBR they call it, and it's like, some of these vendors will stand on the outfall pipe of their facility and literally drink the water that comes out of it. They are much more high-tech and held to a higher standard for treatment and disinfection and what have you. So, and it could be a viable solution. However, the end result is you're still discharging to the Wappinger Creek. And, I know the 9-element plan was like, let's stop
Yeah.
or eliminate the discharge
And-
to the creek, but
And the EFC and the DEC, I'm sorry, not EFC, EPA and also the DEC in this state keep raising the standards. So
Right.
Mike Tremper had concerns about whether or not that
and that was
amount
the
would be
caveat. That's the caveat.
short-term.
So how do we know that, if you did the 8.3 million project, basically replacing the sewer system, that, again, it's going to be acceptable for DEC, and you're not going to have to, 5 years from now?
No, that's what I'm just
So-
saying.
so
That's
I just
what
want to
I
make
was just
sure that,
Well, first of all, it wouldn't go anywhere if it didn't have
DEC approval.
from DEC right
Right.
out of the gate. But the caveat is, as we've seen over the years, they raise their limits and they make it more and more stringent. So
So do we know today that if we're going to do here, the replacing the system, that DEC is going to accept it? Do we know that?
Well,
Because
we
to
have
me,
to
it's not a
make-
viable option if they're not.
We can't just call them up and ask them that. We would have to make a submission. We're confident that this solution would meet the requirements as of today and supersede them. But to supersede them to what extent?
Because
That's-
what I don't want to do is spend 8.3 million and find out I got a $21 million
No, that's exactly- and that's
solution
Mike
down the
Tremper.
road, and
Yeah.
And that's why we're
And Mike
having.
thinks that we would have to spend more.
Yeah.
Over time.
So, again, this is draft. I thought it was important for
Yep.
today's discussion to show.
so the I&I repairs for the 265K, do we need to do that now?
It's recommended. So like I mentioned, we're in grant season now. I believe what we could do is apply for a grant. Well, here's how, this is a short fuse if we're going to do this, but we need to finalize this report with conclusions that we're all in agreement so that when we submit it, we're submitting the message that everybody agrees to.
Is there a timeline for this?
Well, the
We need to do it
timeline
by-
that we're up against is to put in a grant application for that $265,000 July 26th. And we could still do it. It's not,
Yeah, we've been preparing with the framework to do that
well, we would
in
have
our
to go
common
through our
application.
checklist. We'd have to
Correct.
have the standard
Right, right,
resolutions,
right.
which you guys you're used to. You know, there's a typical recipe that we follow for that.
So I'm not so much worried about the grant application on July 26th. What I'm worried about is when does DEC say you have to have it done by? They're giving us
Oh,
6
they-
months, a year?
Well-
What's the timetable?
There is a timetable for a midpoint, but I don't recall.
Yeah, we've agreed to a consent decree.
It was like a 5
With
or
that.
8 year,
Yeah.
was it, didn't we get 8 years for that one, or?
Something
7?
like that.
Does this get paid out
That
of
was
there?
from
A year ago?
a year or two ago.
Yeah, and that's the one where the board, remember,
So we have
paid
a
fine.
tri-muni fund that we have today that's paid in, so we would take the funds out of there for the 265? How does this get paid for, the 265? Or do you have to increase rates?
265 would come out of the fund for Midpoint Park.
And if there's not enough money in there,
Correct.
so that means we'd have to pass this along to the residents?
Yeah, I mean, this is a separate,
If we don't get the grant.
Midpoint is a separate district from the rest of United Wappinger Sewer.
Yeah.
Then I'll add, by making that initiative and trying to get these repairs done is a big step in the right direction. That would be recognized by DEC.
Then it may grant us a little more time down the road to get some of the other projects done?
Well,
So-
they recognize, we've always made the pitch that
Yeah.
it's not like the town isn't doing anything, we need funding, and
Right.
it's
Jim,
their own
sit-
funding process that takes forever.
Jim, since we're trustees, basically for the water district, are we able to allocate any of the ARPA monies
Yes,
to this
I mean,
265? That's what I was thinking now, if we're able to do
That's
that.
where I was going over there, that
I mean, the
2.3 million.
ARPA funds, I had this discussion with some people at the Association of Towns a couple of years ago with respect to the ARPA funds. And, towns stand in a different position than the village.
So one of the things we did do is, I think in the allocation, the original allocation, we had about $800,000 of that 2.3 million for Midpoint specifically. So
Correct.
we could technically use that money?
Yeah, I mean, so there was some allocation, I believe we talked about allocation for, was it
Yeah, I mean, what
Fleetwood?
Al
I
just
just
said,
said-
we-
Fleetwood and Midpoint, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
we had that in
so-
there with that.
So the ARPA funds are only available for water and sewer.
Correct.
Lost revenues and things like that, but, we're different than a city or a village where the costs of water and sewer in a village and a city come out of the general fund, for the most
So
part.
that was my thinking now.
So-
And
so
we
yes.
still can apply for the grant money.
Oh, certainly. Yep.
And do this, So, I mean, I
So,
think-
yeah, I mean, it qualifies under the ARPA, water and sewer infrastructure work do qualify.
Right.
All right.
So I would say.
So I think what we want to do is we want to apply for the application, see what we get, but if we need to do this, Tim, in the next 6 months or so, if we don't, we know we have ARPA money that we can use,
I mean,
because
the
again,
only
we've
thing,
kind of,
so the only thing is the grants, is this
Yeah,
we or is this,
Matching.
I mean, the CFA grant awards don't come out till
I was
December.
gonna say it wouldn't be till the end of the year.
So
that's fine,
again, I
but you
think
probably
we
wouldn't
apply-
start, when would you start the work?
Well, again, this isn't like we got to drop everything and do it immediately. I think is the.
So my point is that you might be able to get the grant money up front, find out how much it is, maybe it's 50, it's 100,000 against the 265, now you can use the balance in the ARPA money,
See,
right? 'Cause you
the
allocated
problem is the
800,000
ARPA
to
money
pay for
has
it.
to be committed by
What's the date? Yeah.
2024?
Yes,
That's what
it's
Scott
next
said
year
the other
sometime,
day.
so
I
we're
always
still
thought it
okay.
was
So we have
the end of
time.
This year, but he said 2024.
Well, I think it's got to be, I thought it had to be obligated this
Obligated,
year
correct.
and spent by 2024, I believe.
Because I keep asking anybody that's in the industry the definition
They-
of obligated.
they don't know.
Nobody can tell me that.
Nobody can say.
Well, obligated means more or less like you've
Kind of contract.
gone out to bid, under contract, maybe created a district, adopted a bond resolution, but you wouldn't be bonding for the grant, so, but that's, the obligated money is a little bit,
But again, if it's something, you're serious about pursuing, then we would have to put together bid specs and go to bid.
Well, let's
all that.
work on that, Tim, then you
please.
can present, to the board as soon as you're able to on that. And then in the meantime, we'll look more into the grant funding as we are doing, and then we'll get a better understanding of obligated and.
Hey, Tim, just on the flow, if you go to either Tri-Muni or East Fishkill, do you have pluses and minuses on either? Because it seems like these are the things we need to have a little bit of foresight. Where we're at now is because of lack of foresight.
Sewer flow, you mean?
Yeah, is there pluses and minuses to go to Tri-Muni versus East
Oh.
Fishkill? Because, but let's face it, like Bill said earlier, you know, we should have done this stuff in the 60s, we didn't. So is there, you know, you don't have to do it now, but, you know, if you have a list of, we should
Pros
do
and
this
cons.
because of this, or
Right.
vice versa.
I guess my personal comment to that is, I mean, you're already under an agreement with Tri-Muni, you know kind of what that's about, good or bad, but you're gonna have to venture into an agreement with East Fishkill.
Yeah, it's more complex.
Now you've got a community with two agreements, one,
Right.
you know?
No, that's, yeah.
I guess the
And
other
there would
question is,
be-
do you have the capacity
If
to
we were
try
to do it
and...
to tri-municipal, there still would be no reason why the county could not connect to that line going down to tri-municipal and share perhaps in some of that
Just
cost.
need to make sure we have capacity to be able to do that.
Well,
So
that's
there
the
is
issue.
capacity,
Yeah.
right?
So that's the sticking point is, I think if maybe you look at the town of Poughkeepsie, they aren't really going to benefit from any sort of expansion. I think they're pretty much limited to what they're providing you. Same kind of goes for the village. The village is the village. It's, you know, it's not like there's even commercial, I mean, maybe there is some commercial, but it's
They don't
small,
have-
right? You're not talking about some of the town's ability to develop some of these larger parcels into something. But right now, they're instilling a 2-to-1 reduction in inflow. So whatever, so I don't know off the top of my head what the flow is from Midpoint, but they want to double that, and we have to go around somewhere in the town and find, improve, and fix where, you know, twice that amount.
But we fixed the I&I here, along with the pavilion one, that was been
Which
fixed.
is why
that
we're
we're-
going to do the pipe work that we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
But I think to your point about forecasting and the need, and it's like, really, this is limiting the town's ability to expand or bring stuff in without really kind of focusing on what should be done at Tri-Muni
Right.
in a priority.
Correct.
kind of manner.
I attended the Tri-Muni meeting on Thursday, and their engineers are just finalizing the a hydraulic study that they had done. Bob Travis at CT Mail was working on it, and they had done a modeling of the existing headworks and some of the capacity in the plant. And what they said is right now, based on the modeling, there is a bottleneck contributed by a number of different functions within the plant structure that limits the capacity to 4 million gallons per day. And their permitted capacity is 2.775. Their average flow is about 1.375.
But in the rain that Bill mentioned, it exceeds the
It can go up
permitted.
to 9.
Yeah, 9 was the record, wasn't the record
They
9?
had 11.
11, oh,
Do they-
okay.
I think they had an 11 on
And
it.
that flows out.
And a very, very, but, so they're looking at ways, and, the current limitation is based on outflows and some baffles within existing tanks and some piping and, various things. But, so, in order to get to, to increase the permitted capacity, they would have to make some changes to the plant.
So
Most
Jim,
of-
since we're talking about Tri-Muni, and then finish up with your discussion, let's also throw in here, number 8, which is the digester and clarifier. You're going to talk with them some more. Did you
Right.
get further clarification on
Yeah,
what that
so,
is about?
so that's, they're, again, it's aging infrastructure. They're looking at basically improving the instrumentation with respect to that. It is the back end before it gets to the sludge, the sludge comes out. So that's the digester process. So this is actually, it's the digesters rather than the clarifiers.
Okay.
Because
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The clarifiers actually have been replaced over the years, and they typically fail at a faster rate. I believe they are currently doing, they more or less have a regular maintenance schedule and replacement schedule on the clarifier.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of clarifier arms and so forth that had to be replaced.
Right.
So did you get, on the digesters, what is involved in that? Because we had asked that and we deferred
So that was on
that.
that's on the, it's in the map plan and report, but basically what they're doing is there would be replacing the clarifiers is kind of the last stage in the process whereby it creates, the wastewater sits and stews, it loses the moisture content in that portion, and then they take it out and they store it in underneath sheds as compost, and then they sell the compost out. This is kind of the, as you de-water, I guess is the word they use, you de-water the sludge, and it's for, the dewatering process. One of the things that they had an issue with in the past was that the 3 clarifiers that they had basically were in series, where you had to come into clarifier 1, and then they had that batch, which then went to clarifier 2, which then went to the final clarifier. This improvement gives them the ability to use the first 2 clarifiers in parallel, so that they have a little bit more capacity, and they can change the flows, if you would, through the 2 clarifiers, and then after it's processed, it then goes to the last.
So is there an impact on capacity then? I mean, it's more
No,
than just...
it's not.
Okay, that's-
It's basically, it's keeping, it's making it easier to, I guess it would create, it's relieving some of the bottlenecks in the current plant. I mean, it doesn't really, it's not increasing the permitted capacity.
Right. Well, that's-
But it's, and that's one of the things that happens in tri-municipal is some of the issues that they have with respect to smell is actually a result of low flow rather than high flow. Because if you have low flow, what happens is there's not enough water going through the process, and there's not enough sludge, so the sludge that's there gets to be smellier. So, and that's one of the other things that this kind of does, is it has the
They've been
ability to...
wrestling with odor control complaints over the years, and I think, they had a couple different firms looking at a couple different solutions. So I looked at this one as probably a robust.
So Al, when we talked about, what Jim was talking, the permitted versus the actual capacity, this was pre-COVID. They were interested and willing to consider if we sent a letter in, Midpoint Park, because it would address part of what Jim's just saying. In dry spells, you would then have more flow coming in, so they were encouraging us. Of course, they wanted the Wildwood, which they approved, because that will increase that flow, within, their capacity. Then the question became, over the last few years, of some of the other deterioration there, could they handle, Midpoint Park at this point of time? So that's why we just need to go back in and get a clarification from them, a letter, saying that they, will approve that, like they have Wildwood.
So this is part of the package we're going to discuss Monday night, the 723K. Okay.
Yes, but I mean, that's for the clarifiers. And then there's still work, like I said, on the hydraulic. So the current hydraulic study that they had done was basically for the plant itself. And one of the things that was discussed at Thursday meeting was another issue is that they're in the process of putting together information for an engineering planning grant for tri-municipal. One of the things that they have to work out is under EFC standards, can Tri-Municipal get an EPG grant, or does it go to the constituent municipalities? Our understanding is that the engineering planning grants from EFC are limited to 2 per municipality. We currently have 1 for Fleetwood and 1 for Wildwood.
Right.
I mean, Midpoint. So the question then becomes, you know, so I had a discussion with Bob Travis, is, you know, can we take, in essence, take Midpoint off the table by finishing it up and qualify us? But
Well, or get Wildwood off the table.
Midpoint, because Midpoint is Midpoint,
Midpoint's an EPG.
right?
Yes.
But I mean, we're just about done with that.
Right.
Yeah, that's
So
almost done.
theoretically, that may come off the table, and we might be able, we might be able to get,
Right.
because one of the other issues that's come up in, that DEC has raised, the Speedies permit for Tri-Municipal has expired. They're in the process of renewing that Speedies permit. The Speedies permit is issued by DEC for, that's the permit that allows you to have a sewer treatment plant. And that's the issue. So the Speedies permit is tied to the effluent limits that, you know, we've had the issue with Wildwood is, what's happened on Wildwood is, as they raise the permit conditions, you then have to change the treatment train in the plant to meet the new permit conditions. Well, with respect to DEC, what's kind of strange is that the collection system does not have a Speedies permit. It's only the treatment plant. So Tri-Municipal is a treatment plant, but all the collection systems are in the individual municipalities. And one of the large issue in any sewer treatment plant is I&I in storm events, because that's what causes the exceedances. But Tri-Municipal doesn't, so DEC has come as part of this permit and has required all the municipalities to submit, the constituent municipalities to submit I&I plans as part of the Speedies application for the plant. So we, you know, CPL has been working on that with Tri-Muni, as has the village and as has the town of Poughkeepsie. But, you know, that has not been an issue in prior Speedies renewals, but it has been now. And in this process, the federal EPA has been involved as well as DEC.
Right.
So, you know, so this permit is getting, this permit renewal is
Exceptional
getting
review.
more detailed review
Right.
than prior permits have.
Correct.
Would the town qualify for an EPG even though they're a tenant, not a?
Yeah, yes. Well, the EPG is for the collection system.
You're right, right.
So, because that's what, you know, that is really, but there is a component of the system. So the collection system in the town of Wappinger goes to a surge tank, which is on the village line. The collection system in the village goes to a surge tank basically next to the town's collection system, town surge tank, so the 2 surge tanks are there. And then there's a siphon that goes underneath. The surge tanks are basically where Creek Road hits the village line. And then there's a siphon that goes underneath Wappinger Creek toward New Hamburg, and then it's pumped up to through Bowden Park and down to the plant.
And part of the issue on the surge tanks, ours was in much better shape than the village, but neither of them had a CAD/CAM sensor process. So part of the upgrades and the costs associated with the upgrade to the facility would be putting that sensoring, monitoring, computer control, so in fact it could maximize the storage retention capability and then release it during the drier period. So it would catch the rainwater and everything coming in, and that then could contribute to it. But that is part of the issue that we've been looking at, you know, on
Right,
controlling
and that's the
flow.
modeling. So the modeling that was done, the hydraulic modeling that was previously done, which was just reported upon, was for the plant, and now CT Mail is expanding that modeling to include the surge tanks. And, you know, one of the potentials on the table is putting a new surge tank between the town and village surge tanks and the plant to control high-flow situations.
It sounds to me like your meeting with the mayor could get really interesting, because as much as we
that's
say we
right.
need them, they need us.
They need us, and that's where the other issues come into play.
There we go.
Yep. So, you know, thanks, Jim. You know, we're pressing Bill's luck on a wonderful job of babysitting from the dais. I know we have a few other important issues, but two of them relating to...
It's not babysitting if it's your child.
Yeah, relating to Nature Preserve, the
saying.
garage are on the agenda for Monday nights. It's only 2 days, and everything, I think, is under control for that. I'd say we just defer that till then, and then we can pick up at another board meeting, maybe at the end of the month, the other, couple items. But we've covered a lot of ground,
I agree.
for this, and I thank the board and the public's attention. But now we just have to dot the i's and cross the t's on the final. And Jim, a lot of that's in your court. Okay, any other comments?
No pressure.
Yeah, it's all you, Jim.
Okay, if not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion. Second.
Motion second, all in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.